Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've always been someone who marches to the beat of their own drum, especially when it comes to fashion. I never really cared about fitting into those perfect little boxes society creates for us. My mom was actually pretty cool about it. She'd take me shopping and let me pick whatever I wanted from any section of the store. She would always remind me that as long as I was comfortable and happy, that's what mattered. Fast forward to last month, and I finally worked up the courage to get that pixie cut I've been dreaming about for years. My hair used to be down to my waist, and while it was pretty, it just never felt like me. The day I walked out of that salon with my new short hair, I felt like I could finally breathe. My boyfriend was super supportive too, telling me that it brought out my eyes and made me look more confident. So there I was, walking around the mall with my boyfriend, feeling great about life. I was wearing this awesome Hawaiian shirt I'd found in the men's section. It had these ridiculous flamingos all over it, and the fabric was so soft and breezy. I had it unbuttoned over a black tank top, paired with some short shorts and leggings. Pretty standard outfit for me. We'd been shopping for a couple of hours when nature called, so I headed to the women's bathroom while my boyfriend went to check out some video games. The bathroom was empty, except for this one woman who was doing her makeup at the mirror. I barely noticed her as I walked toward one of the stalls, but suddenly she was right there in front of me, clutching her mascara like it was a weapon. She demanded to know if this bathroom wasn't for women only. I stared at her, completely confused, and replied that yes, it was. That's when I noticed her eyes doing this weird scan of my chest area, like she was trying to x-ray me or something. I asked her if there was a problem, and she started mumbling about how they needed to be careful these days because some men try to sneak in. I was so done with this conversation. If she wanted to make this weird, I could make it weirder. I sarcastically suggested that if she'd like, she could check. I even offered to let her come into the stall with me since we were both women after all. Her eyes went wide and she took a step back, nearly dropping her mascara. She started stammering, trying to backtrack, but I doubled down. I asked her if she was sure, pointing out that she seemed pretty concerned about what was in my pants a minute ago. I told her I wouldn't want her to lose sleep over it. She turned bright red and practically ran back to her spot at the mirror. I did my business, and while I was washing my hands, she cleared her throat and tried to apologize. I cut her off, telling her that while she shouldn't have done it, what was really sad was that I could walk away from this and laugh about it, but there are people who face this kind of harassment every single day just trying to use the bathroom. I suggested she think about that next time she decides to play bathroom police. I dried my hands and walked out, head held high. My boyfriend was waiting outside, and when I told him what happened, he couldn't stop laughing. I told him the funniest part was that she probably went home and told everyone about the man she bravely confronted in the women's bathroom, conveniently leaving out the part where she got shut down. Last I saw, she was still in there pretending to fix her makeup while actually hiding from embarrassment. I've been a professional wrestler for about 5 years now. I compete in the women's division of several independent wrestling promotions across the state, and I absolutely love what I do. Sure, some people might think it's an unusual career choice for a woman, but I couldn't care less about their opinions. The thing is, being a wrestler means I naturally have a more muscular build than the average woman. I'm proud of my physique. It's a result of countless hours of training and dedication. Last weekend, I decided to take a break from my usual routine and have a girls' night out with my two best friends from college. We picked this new bar downtown that had great reviews for its cocktails. Everything was going perfectly fine for the first hour or so. We were catching up, sharing stories, and enjoying our drinks. That's when this group of guys at the table next to us started getting rowdy. One of them, this tall dude who clearly thought way too highly of himself, kept looking over at our table and making not so subtle comments to his friends. He loudly joked about me being a bodybuilder and suggested I must be taking supplements, making his friends laugh like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I tried to ignore them, but he just wouldn't stop. He continued his harassment by asking his friends if they thought I could bench press all of them. My friend tried to calm me down, suggesting we should just ignore them as they weren't worth our attention. But this guy was getting bolder with every drink. He started making exaggerated bodybuilding poses whenever I looked in his direction. He then shouted across to us that the bodybuilding competition was next door, thinking he was being clever. My other friend offered to get the bouncer, but I insisted we should just try to enjoy our night. But Mr. Entitled wasn't done. He got up and stumbled over to our table, flexing his arms in what he probably thought was an impressive display. He started mocking me about my appearance, suggesting I should compete in the men's division because I'd fit right in. I tried to be civil, explaining that I just wanted to have a nice evening with my friends and asked him to leave us alone. He wouldn't back down, insisting he was just being friendly and challenging me to an arm wrestling match, offering to bet drinks on it. When I declined and told him to go back to his table, things took a turn. His face got red, probably a mix of alcohol and wounded pride. He then questioned my courage, asking if I was afraid of losing to what he called a real man. I stood up, ready to get the bouncer, but that's when this genius had the bright idea to try and tackle me. Maybe he thought he'd prove something to his friends. Maybe the alcohol had completely fried his brain. Either way, he lunged at me like a drunk bull. Big mistake. Years of wrestling training kicked in automatically. I sidestepped, used his momentum against him, and executed a perfect hip toss. He landed flat on his back, the wind completely knocked out of him. His friend's jaws dropped to the floor. After recovering, he started yelling threats about calling the police. His friends were no help to him, instead mocking him for getting beaten up by a girl and gleefully commenting about how everyone would hear about this. He tried to shut them up, still insisting that I had assaulted him and demanding someone call the authorities. The bouncer, who had seen the whole thing, finally came over. He explained that he'd witnessed everything and that I was clearly defending myself against the guy's assault. He ordered them all to leave immediately. The entitled guy tried to pull the "do you know who my father is" card, but the bouncer couldn't care less, threatening to call the police himself if they didn't leave. His friends practically dragged him out, still laughing at his expense. One of them actually came back a minute later to apologize to me, admitting that while their friend was always a jerk, he usually wasn't this bad. He also complimented my move, acknowledging that I had really put his friend in his place. The bouncer gave us free drinks for the trouble, and we actually ended up having a great rest of the night. A week later, I was at a local wrestling show where I was scheduled to perform, and guess who was in the audience with his friends? Yep, Mr. Entitled himself. The look on his face when I came out and was announced as the undefeated champion was horrific. His friends nearly died laughing, pointing at him and making sure everyone around them knew he was the guy who got dropped by her at the bar. I made sure to look directly at him and flex after winning my match. It all started when I began saving up for a car during my junior year of high school. I worked part-time at a local grocery store, putting away every spare dollar I could. My parents taught me the value of money early on, and I knew I'd need reliable transportation for college and work. My grandmother had this beautiful 2018 Toyota Camry that she kept in pristine condition. When she mentioned getting a new car, I saw my opportunity. We had a heart-to-heart conversation about my savings and future plans. She offered to sell me her car for $8,000, way below market value, with a reasonable payment plan. It was perfect timing since I was also preparing for my driver's test. That's when my great-aunt, who I'll call Karen, because that's exactly who she is, got involved. She's my grandmother's sister, and she's always had this weird attitude toward me. I never understood why. Maybe it's because I'm the youngest in the family, or perhaps she is just naturally bitter. Whatever the reason, she's made it her mission to make snide comments about everything I do. During Thanksgiving dinner last month, when my grandmother announced her plans to buy a new car, Karen immediately perked up. She eagerly asked about buying the car herself, but my grandmother quickly told her that she had already arranged to sell it to me. Karen protested, arguing that I didn't even have a license yet and that she needed the car more than I did. When I tried to explain that I was working on getting my license and had been saving up, she dismissed me by saying I was just a kid who knew nothing about maintaining a car. My grandmother shut down the conversation right there, but Karen wouldn't let it go. She kept bringing it up at every family gathering, making comments about how some people get everything handed to them. Ironic, considering I'm the one working and saving. Fast forward to December. I took my driver's test but didn't pass. Nothing major, just needed more practice with parallel parking and a few other things. Karen saw this as her golden opportunity. I couldn't make it to our family Christmas gathering because of work, but my coworker was kind enough to give me a ride. What happened there was like something out of a bad movie. According to my grandmother, Karen walked in with this smug look on her face. She immediately announced that she almost had enough money for the car and could get the rest by next week. My grandmother had to remind her yet again that the car was being sold to me. Karen tried to use my failed driver's test as leverage, saying I obviously didn't need a car. My grandmother defended me, explaining that I would pass eventually and reminding Karen that most of our family didn't pass on their first try either. Karen then complained about needing the car for her appointments and how hard it was for her to get around. What Karen conveniently failed to mention was that she receives disability benefits that include free transportation to any medical appointments or essential errands. She just doesn't like waiting for the transport service. She also conveniently forgot to mention that she can barely afford basic car maintenance, let alone gas and insurance. Throughout the entire gathering, she kept making passive-aggressive comments. She would loudly comment about how nice it must be to have family members just give you cars, and how some people have to struggle while others get everything handed to them. She repeatedly brought up how she would just have to keep suffering while trying to get to her appointments. The next day, my grandmother told me everything and immediately took action. She drew up a formal contract for both of us to sign, establishing my ownership of the car. She even had it notarized, just to be extra safe. The contract outlined the payment plan and transfer of ownership, making it crystal clear that the car was mine. Karen didn't know that I'd been documenting all her harassment, every text message, every social media post where she complained about me stealing her car opportunity, every witness account from family members. When she tried to claim to other family members that my grandmother had promised her the car first, I had proof that was a lie. The final straw came when she showed up at my grandmother's house one day, demanding to test drive what she called her new car. My grandmother called me immediately and I contacted the police non-emergency line. They came and explained to Karen that any further attempts to claim the car would be considered harassment. Now whenever Karen starts up about the car at family gatherings, my grandmother just pulls out a copy of the contract from her purse and starts reading it out loud. Karen usually finds an excuse to leave the room pretty quickly. After that, I passed my driver's test on the second try, by the way. The car is officially mine now, and Karen has finally stopped talking about it, mostly because nobody pays attention to her complaints anymore. After pulling a series of night shifts at the hospital where I work as an emergency room nurse, I finally had a day to myself. My fridge was practically empty since I hadn't had time to do proper grocery shopping in almost 2 weeks. I threw on some comfortable clothes, just a plain blue t-shirt and jeans, and headed to the nearest supermarket. The store's actual employees wore red polo shirts with the store logo, so there wasn't any way someone could mistake me for staff, or so I thought. I was in the produce section, carefully selecting some fresh vegetables for meal prep when it all started. A woman approached me and asked if I could help her find low-fat milk, saying she couldn't find it anywhere. I tried to explain that I didn't work there, but she cut me off mid-sentence, telling me not to be lazy and to just check the fridge section for her. Her tone was so demanding that I actually froze for a second. 12 years of dealing with difficult patients in the emergency room had taught me that sometimes it's easier to just help and move on than argue with someone who won't listen. I told her I'd show her where the dairy section was. I led her there, found the low-fat milk, and handed it to her. She snatched it without so much as a thank you and walked away. I thought that would be the end of my unexpected customer service adventure. An elderly man approached me next. He asked me where the bread aisle was. I tried to explain again that I didn't work there, but he interrupted, saying his wife was waiting in the car and he needed to hurry. I sighed and pointed him toward aisle 3. Before I could return to my shopping, a woman with 2 kids tugging at her sleeves approached me. She asked if we had any gluten-free pasta. When I tried to explain that I didn't work there, she cut me off, saying her kids were hungry and they were already running late for soccer practice. At this point, I was starting to feel like I was in some sort of bizarre hidden camera show. I showed her where the gluten-free products were, and suddenly, it was like I'd opened the floodgates. More people started approaching me with questions. A teenager asked where the energy drinks were. A man in a business suit needed help finding quinoa. A grandmother couldn't reach the top shelf and needed assistance. Everyone just assumed I worked there, and no one would let me finish explaining that I didn't. The store manager walked by, a middle-aged man in a crisp white shirt bearing the store logo. He stopped to praise my work, remarking that they needed more hard-working people like me. I opened my mouth to explain the situation, but he was already walking away. That's when Karen returned, this time with a complaint. She angrily claimed that the milk I gave her was expired and demanded to speak to my supervisor. I tried once again to explain that I didn't work there and was just doing my grocery shopping. She accused me of lying, pointing out that she had just seen my manager praise me and threatened to have me fired. She started making a scene and other customers were turning to look. The store manager came back to see what the commotion was about. When he asked what the problem was, Karen immediately complained that I had given her expired milk and then had the audacity to claim I didn't work there. The manager looked confused and started to question the situation. He looked at me more carefully this time, taking in my casual attire. He explained that he had thought I was a new hire starting that day and they were expecting someone. He then asked if I really didn't work there. I explained that I was an emergency room nurse on my day off and that I'd spent the last 20 minutes helping people because they wouldn't let me explain that I didn't work there. The manager burst out laughing while Karen's face turned as red as the employees' polo shirts. He offered to check the milk for her. After examining the carton, he told her that the milk didn't expire for another week. He then suggested that since this kind customer took time out of her day off to help, perhaps she'd like to apologize. Karen stormed off without a word, abandoning her shopping cart full of groceries. The manager turned to me with an apologetic smile and apologized for the confusion. He offered me a discount on my groceries as a thank you for helping their customers, even though I had no obligation to do so. I accepted the discount gratefully, finished my shopping, and headed home with a story that none of my co-workers would believe. Now whenever I go grocery shopping, I make sure to wear the most outlandish outfits possible, just to make sure no one mistakes me for an employee again. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.